Mumbai are bringing our first India tour in your city. Rag on with Shankar Ehsan Loy and Siddharth Mahadevan and Shivam Mahadevan. 5 times melody, 5 times masti with NDTV Good Times. Go grab your tickets on Live Your City by Fever.
It is Asia's richest civic body. 2026 begins with Big Bang BMC poll. High stakes Mumbai battle loading. Can BJP extend Maha winning streak? Existential fight for the Sena. Can the Congress strike a comeback? Maha civic body, massive implications. NDTV tracks the Maha buildup, battleground BMC.
Are you ready for the best show in town? NDTV Golf Pro-Am, we are coming to your city. Stay tuned.
Good evening, viewer. Welcome to India Matters on Monday night with me, Shiv Aroor. Let's get, as always, straight to the top stories we're tracking at 8 tonight. Supreme Court denies bail to Sharjeel Imam Umar Khalid in the 2020 Northeast Delhi riots case. Says cannot treat all individuals equally for bail. 5 others have been granted bail. Battleground Tamil Nadu escalates. Home Minister Amit Shah's sunrise jibe at Chief Minister Stalin. Meanwhile, all eyes on the TVK's next move is the Congress flirting with Vijay's party. After the massive controversy over Bangladesh pacer Mustafizur Rahman, now the Bangladesh government has banned the streaming of the Indian Premier League in the country. The Bangladesh Cricket Board has stated that the team will not be travelling to India due to security concerns and requested the ICC to shift the T20 World Cup matches from India to Sri Lanka. Deposed Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro is set to appear in a New York court shortly tonight, 2 days after being captured in the Venezuelan capital during a dramatic US military operation that paves the way for Washington's plans in the oil-rich Latin American country. The US bombardment of Venezuela and the capture of its president Nicolas Maduro has sent fresh shockwaves far beyond Latin America, all the way to Greenland, where Donald Trump's latest remarks, "need Greenland for national security," are being read as an ominous signal of what Trump could target next. Viewer, you and I can sit in our chairs and fret and fume and moralize over Trump's insane military operation into Venezuela to abduct the country's president. But the reason I lead with the story tonight is because that one act has changed our world again, and we are not going to go back to the old ways. What sounded like bluster just days ago no longer does. And after Venezuela, the uncomfortable question now being asked across capitals, including here in Delhi, is simple. Who's next on Donald Trump's radar? Because the warning signs are no longer subtle. The wife of a Trump aide has already posted a map of Greenland draped in the American flag, captioned with just one word, soon. It echoes Trump's own repeated insistence, including today, that the US needs Greenland since it belongs more to North America than it does to Denmark, its imperial owner. What once sounded like absurd Trump-style empty threats now sits firmly in the realm of the possible, as we have seen in Venezuela. And it doesn't stop there. No, it doesn't. Colombia has been publicly warned to stop drugs flowing north, with Trump delivering a crude, unmistakable threat to directly at President Gustavo Petro. Cuba has been dismissed as a failing state, with Trump openly predicting collapse. Mexico is described as cartel run, with Trump saying America will have to do something. Panama has been told bluntly the US control of the Panama Canal is back on the table. And Iran, let's not forget Iran, has already seen Trump put his money where his mouth is, striking nuclear sites in the past, that's last year, and now issuing intervention warnings amidst fresh unrest. Here is the shift the world has changed, viewer. Venezuela is not some tin pot banana republic, and Iran proved that this is not just rhetoric. Trump has demonstrated that when he talks about force, whether or not you agree with him or even like him, he is willing to use it, and he is oftentimes compelled by visceral defiance by these countries. So please listen carefully tonight, because what was once far-fetched is now entirely in the realm of the possible. This is no longer fantasy geopolitics. Regime change is real. It's a growing global anxiety over who is next. Leaders are scrambling, posturing, even pleading to ensure they're in Trump's whitelist. Denmark's own Prime Minister has begun a careful mix of appeasement and polite warning, careful not to anger this simmering beast. Whether it was the subtle US deep state enforced regime change in Bangladesh last year, or the open appeasement of Pakistan's military ruler now, Trump has signaled with historic clarity that sovereign states stand to lose their sovereignty if they so much as rub Trump the wrong way. It can come quietly like a well-funded pseudo-revolution, or with the hammer fall of helicopters firing missiles like we saw in the skies over Venezuela. The world is watching, uneasy, because the unthinkable is no longer just that, unthinkable.
The world's focus is on Latin America at the moment, with Donald Trump issuing a warning to new Venezuelan leader Delcy Rodriguez that she could pay a very big price, probably bigger than Maduro, if she doesn't do what's right. While most people seemingly have their eyes set on the unprecedented situation unfolding in Caracas, Trump has his own set of priorities, threatening one nation after another. Colombia, which is Venezuela's neighbor, was one of the first nations to receive a stern warning from Trump. He hasn't ruled out intervention in Colombia, describing its left-wing president Gustavo Petro as a drug trafficker and a sick man. Petro, on the other hand, has denied the accusations, warning Trump not to slander him. Trump doubled down on his controversial remarks about Greenland, insisting the US needs the Arctic territory for national security, citing alleged Chinese and Russian submarine activity in the region. Greenland's Prime Minister Jens Friedrich Nielsen responded by saying that's enough now and described the notion of US control over the island as a fantasy. The already fragile relationship between Cuba and the US is also facing fresh strain after Donald Trump described the island nation as a failing country.
Cuba is ready to fall. You know? Yes. Cuba looks like it's ready to fall. I don't know if they can hold out.
Trump also renewed pressure on Mexico, saying he would prefer Mexican authorities deal with powerful drug cartels themselves, but warned if they do not, Washington may be forced to step in. Trump has also issued a stark warning to Iran. He said if Iranian authorities begin killing demonstrators, as they have in the past, the US would respond with what he described as very hard action. Vishal Vivek for NDTV World.
And in the last 36 hours, Trump has signaled his desire to take Greenland, which is in the North Atlantic. It's a part of the Kingdom of Denmark. He has said it no less than 3 times. Here's the latest, where he has signaled that he wants Greenland. Take a look.
We need Greenland from a national security situation. It's so strategic. Right now, Greenland is covered with Russian and Chinese ships all over the place. We need Greenland from the standpoint of national security. And Denmark is not going to be able to do it, I can tell you.
So why exactly does Trump want Greenland? Greenland, in most people's mind, is an obscure, large island. Let me tell you a little bit about it and why Trump has his sights set on Greenland. It is the world's largest island. It's in the North Atlantic, off the coast of the northern part of Canada, well within the Arctic region. Politically, it is a part of the Kingdom of Denmark, but geographically, it is a part of North America. It sits on the North American plate. It is key in terms of its strategic location because, as you can see, it's in the Arctic. That's a very, very strategic area. Access to vast rare earth minerals is, of course, an attractive feature. Perfect place to monitor Russian and Chinese ships as well. And it is a counter to Russian and Chinese Arctic influence. And as you heard Trump himself say, there are way too many Russian and Chinese ships in Greenland, and therefore we need Greenland, he says, for our national security. So the question now is, after what Trump has done in Venezuela, are his words merely bluster, or is he really planning to go after another country next? I've just shown you what looks like a menu card of countries that could be next on Trump's target list. And this is not to oversimplify a complicated issue, but in Trump's world, things have started to seem a lot more black and white than they were earlier. Joining me live to make sense of this entire evolving situation, where Trump has talked about, we need Greenland now. I'm joined now by some of the most respected voices from different parts of the world to help us navigate this truly bizarre state of global affairs that we find ourselves in tonight. Glenn Carl, former Deputy National Intelligence Officer with the US National Intelligence Council. Welcome, Glenn. Dr. Brahmachalani is one of India's most well-regarded strategic affairs experts and a former advisor with India's National Security Council. Einar Tangen is global and China strategist and a well-respected commentator on US, China, and global affairs in general. Welcome, Einar. And Ambassador Meera Shankar, former ambassador to the United States. Glenn, I'd like to kick it off with you. In the last 36 hours, we've seen President Trump use the phrase, we need Greenland, no less than 3 times. You know, the usual sort of filter that one assigns to interpreting Trump's words have changed dramatically in the last 72 hours post-Venezuela. What are you making of Trump saying we need Greenland?
Well, there is a strong strategic case that Greenland is of real interest to the United States. And I'm afraid to say that in some ways, Greenland would pose a less complex problem to Trump and U.S. military or intelligence authorities than Venezuela, because there are only something like 56,000 people there. Yeah. There's not an entire society with the rich texture of economics, social, political contradictions and desires to deal with. And Denmark, of course, could do nothing about it if Trump were to act. So I am afraid to say that just as you have presented the new world of the last 48 hours, Greenland is a plausible, real step for Trump to be considering. I've expressed no assessment of value, merit, wisdom therein, but from a practical perspective, Trump is not being crazy in that sense.
Okay, not crazy and definitely plausible, says Glenn Carl. Ambassador Shankar, Trump has said he's dismissed talk of, rare earths and oil and minerals. When it comes to Greenland, he said this is purely from a national security sort of requirement. But we also know that Greenland aside, there are other countries that are on this sort of veritable menu card. You know, I don't mean that disrespectfully, but it virtually reads like one. There's Colombia, there's Mexico, there's Panama, there's Cuba, there's Iran, there's even Canada, for God's sake, where Trump's been making these loose comments about, wanting to impose American will on. How do you see this? Greenland aside, it's no longer a question of, will he take someone next? It's literally who's next?
Well, I think that Trump's national security strategy made it clear that the U.S. is seeking dominance in the Western Hemisphere, in the Americas, to reassert the Monroe Doctrine that no foreign powers will be allowed to have influence there, and that he's prepared to use force, military force, to actually enforce it. That we've seen in the raid on Venezuela. But if you look at the countries that he's selecting, they are countries which are rich in fossil fuel reserves. Like Venezuela has not only the largest reserves of oil in the world, but also of gold, of copper, of iron, maybe nickel, I'm not sure, but they do have a large amount of reserves of minerals, some of which may be critical. Similarly, if you're looking at Greenland, it's again sitting on huge oil reserves.
Yeah.
And it controls strategic communication waterways, which could open up, once the Arctic shipping becomes a reality with the melting of the ice. Similarly, if you look at Iran, again, it's an oil-rich country, which has huge reserves of oil. And similarly, if you look at Nigeria, where President Trump has ordered strikes against terrorist, groups operating there, you're looking at someone who basically is eyeing the world and seeing where the resources are that the US needs and saying, I want. So there is really no international order through which this is happening. Now, Venezuela, I think the difficult part may come now, because the question is, will running it, as the US is saying, temporarily be easy for the US? Will it be complicated? Will there be resistance? Or will there be, kind of a guerrilla movement which erupts? We really don't know. Because if you've seen, the US, whenever it has gone in for regime change operations, it really has not, in several cases, I won't say in all, in several cases, been able to assure an orderly transition or an orderly regime change which endures. A lot of the countries have really just faced constant instability.
Correct.
Whether you look at Afghanistan, you look at Libya, now you are seeing in Syria that there was regime change, but it's still, it's taking hold, but the question is still out as to whether it will be stable.
And there are many observers who are calling this neo-colonialism, whether it is regime change or neo-colonialism, helped along by Trump himself, using phrases like, we will run Venezuela now. And you had one of his aides had to sort of step in and kind of do a little bit of damage control. Dr. Chelani, in your mind, who's next? That doesn't seem like a sort of fantasy question anymore.
Well, Shiv, the developments since last weekend clearly are a throwback to the imperial age.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable that in the 21st century, we are seeing such an open display of imperialism. And this will come back to haunt the US. It will erode America's long-term interests. As far as America's soft power is concerned, Trump is already shattering it beyond repair. But look at the paradox. The European political elites promptly cheered Trump's action in Venezuela.
Yeah.
Now they're concerned about Greenland being Trump's next target. So when they were cheering the military operation in Caracas, they didn't even think about Greenland. And look at the other paradox here. That first, let me answer that question of yours as to what comes next. First, it's apparent that Trump feels emboldened by the rapid success that he achieved in Venezuela in capturing Maduro and his wife. But look at what has happened in the past. Well, look at Afghanistan, for example, in 2001. The US forces were quick to evict the Taliban from power. But then they got bogged down in a 20-year war in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
In Iraq, they invaded Iraq, and soon thereafter, they managed to capture Saddam Hussein. What followed was a military quagmire. The American soldiers who were killed in the Iraq war were all of them died, not before but after the capture of Saddam Hussein. So the easy part of taking out Maduro, that part is over.
Yeah.
What comes now is going to recoil on the US. What Trump has done, he has unified the Venezuelan society. There was deep polarization in that country between the forces who were supporting Maduro and those who were opposed to him. Now, the reaction there is that, look, it's not about democracy, it's about oil that the Americans want. They want our oil. So there's going to be an upsurge of nationalism in that country, and the terrain of Venezuela is quite suitable for insurgencies. And in fact, there are already several major insurgent groups operating in that country.
Yeah.
The US will not be able to steal that country's oil that easily. In fact, American companies who were tipped off about the military operation, even though Congress was not notified, the US Congress was not told about it, but the oil companies were told about it in advance, as Trump himself has acknowledged. They'll have to invest billions of dollars in order to extract oil from there.
No, you're right.
And given the turmoil that will likely follow, the instability in the turmoil, they will not be able to exploit the oil resources.
No, that's a very, very...
Things will come back to haunt the US.
That's a hugely important point you make, and I agree when you say, and Ambassador Shankar also said that it won't be the first time that an American intervention has created fertile ground for an insurgency or a guerrilla-style movement or a nationalist movement. We'll have to see how it actually works out in Venezuela. But for a view from the East, from China, Einar Tangen, how do you read what Trump might actually do next? In his stated ambitions on Greenland, he has said it's a national security requirement because this is a place that is overrun by Chinese and Russian ships. There are the Arctic, shipping channels, as Ambassador Shankar also said. Do you think that's really going to happen?
Well, I'd like to ask you a question, or at least to point something out. During these last few days, have you heard any mention of the Epstein files in terms of media? The answer would be no. You haven't heard about the plight of Americans who are facing 40 million Americans facing the doubling of their health insurance policies, the record number of bankruptcies. So this is working for Donald Trump. Regardless of whether, he definitely is transactional. He'd love to take everything he could because he's strong. He's a bully. But it is also working on the political level for him. He's successfully diverted attention away from his weakest points, points which are tearing his base apart. They're not happy. They're the ones who are suffering under his economic policies. And they are certainly very, very interested in those Epstein files, and they feel that he has been less than forthcoming. So you're going to continue to see Donald Trump do what he always does. Remember, it's always about throwing a dead cat onto the table in front of the press and then releasing a bunch of white rabbits. And the press follows them. The fact that we're talking about this and only this, right, is an indication that he is controlling the narrative internationally. The fact that he's doing it through unbelievable, shocking means, abandoning the global order, as my colleagues have pointed out, destroying American soft power, as my colleagues have pointed out, doesn't matter to him. What matters to him most is the moment. He has said many times in his biographies, he gets up every day and tries to maximize that day. He doesn't think about yesterday, doesn't think about tomorrow, just what he can do today. Right now, he's facing these political tests with his own base. This is a welcome reprieve for him, and he's going to continue to use it to divert attention.
So you're basically saying that this is a weapon of mass distraction, and it won't be the first time, that an American president has triggered some kind of an external conflict to distract, if you will, the world or maybe even America from what's going on the inside. But I'm glad that Dr. Chelani mentioned Europe and the United Kingdom, because that comes to part B, and I'd like all of you to stay with me, because that's the second part of my story tonight. Because if there's one part of the world that has sustained more damage, well, perceptionally speaking, than Venezuela in Trump's attack, it is the United Kingdom and the European Union. A continent that ruled the rest of the world less than a century ago has now been reduced in many people's minds to groveling pathetically in front of Trump. And it is truly an epic and historic sight. When Russia crossed into Ukraine, European leaders found their voice instantly. Moral outrage, thunderous speeches, billions in weapons, red lines, ultimatums. Keir Starmer, Kaja Kallas, Emmanuel Macron, Berlin, Brussels, all loud, all righteous, all absolutely certain about international law, sovereignty, and the rules-based order. But when the United States does something similar in Venezuela, the same leaders suddenly develop a bit of a stutter. It's embarrassing, cringeworthy, how tame nearly every single European leader has managed to sound in the last 48 hours. Statements are vague, language is soft, condemnation disappears, and don't get me started on how these leaders in Europe and the UK have sounded on Trump directly talking about taking Greenland. They have completely whitewashed it. They have abandoned a NATO ally. They've talked about monitoring closely. They've talked about waiting for all the facts. They've talked about being concerned about escalations. Not a single sharp word aimed at Washington in support of their ally. Starmer's Britain rushes to clarify it wasn't involved in what happened in Venezuela. The EU talks about the Venezuelan people while carefully tiptoeing around the man who ordered the operation. Not a single word about Greenland. Europe's global leadership was dead some decades ago, metaphorically speaking. This was merely a reminder in most people's view. This is a continent that has never hesitated to lecture the global south, including India, about democracy, borders, and intervention. A continent that made moral instruction its favorite export. Yet, faced with the US president, they cannot domesticate. Europe shrinks into itself in a historic way. To be fair, Europe's anxiety, not saying a word, being very, very careful, even when Trump says he will take a part of Denmark, is understandable at one level. Trump has made it clear that even NATO allies aren't safe. Denmark is watching nervously as Greenland is casually discussed like a real estate asset. Now, post-World War II treaties, alliances, taboos, Trump has shown that he would rather treat them with open irreverence, and the snooty, highbrow politics of Europe just doesn't know how to deal with it. And that is why Europe is paralyzed in some ways. If you look at the British media right now, it is embarrassing. MP after MP, minister after minister, the Prime Minister, other leaders are simply unwilling to say a single word about Trump threatening a NATO ally. This is every man and woman for themselves now. No collective spine, no shared courage, just quiet, pathetic groveling to stay on the right side of American power in the form of Trump at this time. Glenn, I'd like to start it off once again with you. I did want to put a spotlight on the UK and the EU. I don't want to be very, very harsh because I think diplomats and political leaders have a hard time walking a tightrope in Trump's world. And we know how dramatically things have changed in the last 72 hours. But this is embarrassing. When Trump talks about taking Greenland, a part of a country that happens to be a member of NATO, not a single EU member, not the British Prime Minister, nobody has had anything even remotely direct to say to Trump or that. How do you understand that? How do you read that? Are you surprised?
Not surprised, and I have a bit more, I think, compassion, perhaps, or inclination to defend the timorous response by European leaders so far, because they're in an awkward spot.
Yeah.
Trump is a sociopath and reacts reflexively and violently to any imagined disagreements. If one does not kowtow utterly, then he will seek to destroy the person, and he holds grudges. And the U.S. is powerful. Europe is disjointed in material sense in this equation. So it's wiser for the Europeans to avoid provoking an irrational, aggressive, sociopathic bear with a lot of military forces in an effort to stop him from doing what they oppose.
Yeah.
So I think it's a sensible thing, although it is humiliating. Now, were we speaking 10 years from now, if trends continue, Europe will have once again, for the first time in 80 years, developed significant global level force projection capabilities. And then you wouldn't find such timorous behavior. But for now, it's a sensible way to try to avoid provoking Trump from doing what he seems to be inclined to do.
Sensible but humiliating. Ambassador Shankar, how do you see it?
I would agree with that assessment to some extent. But what it does is that it makes Europe complicit to some extent in the erosion of the international order.
Yeah.
You know, when you're talking about a rules-based order or law-based order, in fact, this is the interesting thing, that the US talks about a rules-based order, not an international law-based order. But
not now.
It clearly erodes it. And that, I think, is going to be the larger consequence for the world, because it means that the powerful can do what they want.
Yeah.
And the weak will have to endure what they must. So I think we are really moving into a world which is red in tooth and claw.
Yeah.
It's not a world which will look at, adhering to the UN Charter, respecting territorial integrity, respecting sovereignty. And of course, there are very visible double standards, as we've seen, both not just with regard to Venezuela. I think the whole world has kept silent with regard to Gaza. And, the population there has paid a terrible price for everyone's support for Israel and Israel's security. And now you're seeing it again with regard to Venezuela. You're seeing it again with regard to Greenland. So I think this is going to be the larger casualty. You know, one is what Trump will do or not do, because a lot is going to depend on how easy he finds it. If he finds he's going to get bogged down, his base itself will actually go against him, because their whole argument has been that the US's foreign military entanglements overseas have been at the cost of the US's own prosperity, and that workers in the US, people in the US have paid that price, and they are no longer willing to do it.
Yeah.
And this was Trump's platform when he came. Again, his national security strategy was talking of a more limited role for the US globally, saying he doesn't seek global dominance, though he seeks dominance in the Western Hemisphere. But what you're seeing now is contrary to actually the mandate that he was given and the agenda that he promised to follow. So if it's easy, people will buy into the success. If the US gets bogged down in Venezuela in any way, or it involves a prolonged military or administrative operation and expenditure, I think there will be political consequences within the US itself.
Yeah, yeah. Sensible, for the moment, coming back to the EU and the UK, Aina tangent, but an erosion, complicity in the erosion of the international order. Would you agree with that?
Well, I'd agree with it, but I disagree with my two previous colleagues when they talk about defeatism. Yes, if you say to yourself, well, there's nothing I can do, tut tut, we're going back to the days of Chamberlain, the idea that you just keep appeasing a bully and somehow it'll all work out. You think for one instance, if Donald Trump was able to establish complete hegemony over everything from Greenland down to Argentina, that he would stop there? I think, but the other thing you have to realize is his nickname, Taco. Trump always chickens out. And the reason I mention that is there is a way forward. And it is for the global South and the stands to gather together, not on as an organization or anything like that, but just gather together and say to the US, enough. Stop this erosion of the international laws. And we're not going to fight you militarily, but you cannot fight all of us. And we will start imposing trade sanctions on you. Your resources will be more expensive. We will not accept your goods. And you can kiss all these services goodbye. We'll put tariffs on them. If that happens, Trump would live up to his nickname. He would have no choice but to chicken out and find some other dead cat or white rabbits to release in front of the press to try to get them away from his internal issues. So I reject this idea that we should all just give in and that this is some sort of chess game. This is our lives. This is the future of our children and our grandchildren. The idea that you can somehow appease a monster and he'll go away sometime. Well, that's been tried before. Didn't work.
Yeah, and I would somewhat agree with that, especially when the red lines we're talking about here, pertain to a NATO ally. In some ways, it can be understood, the prevarications and the obfuscations when it comes to Maduro and Venezuela. But when it comes to Europe, when it comes to Greenland, it's much more explicit and it becomes more apparent. The one thing, and I'd like all of you to stay with me once again as I move to part 3 of this story, which is that Trump has always talked about reminding the world of American military power. So I did want to put a bit of our spotlight tonight on the US Delta Force. This is the group that most people in a few weeks might actually forget was responsible for this incredibly complicated operation where the US entered a sovereign nation, attacked it, when were able to abduct its most protected citizen, its president. This is what the US Delta Force did and what it's all about.
In the shadows of America's defense stands one of the most elite units in the world, Delta Force. Officially known as the 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta, this secretive US Army unit was founded in 1977 by Colonel Charles Beckwith, inspired by the British SAS to combat the rising threat of global terror. Delta operators are the best of the best, hand-selected from Rangers, Green Berets and beyond. They undergo grueling training in counter-terrorism, hostage rescue, direct action raids, and high-value target captures. From the intense Battle of Mogadishu in 1993, immortalized in Black Hawk Down, where Delta snipers earned medals of honor defending downed pilots, to the raid that eliminated the ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi in 2019. And most recently, the capture of the Venezuelan leader Nicolás Maduro in Caracas during Operation Absolute Resolve, along with countless classified missions in Iraq, Afghanistan, and beyond. Delta Force operates under the Joint Special Operations Command, striking swiftly and silently when ordered to deploy. They are the tip of the spear, unseen, often unstoppable, and some say without equal, America's ultimate shadow warriors. Vishnu Shom for NDTV.
Now, when Trump's attack on Venezuela became public, one of the things that several observers immediately said was that this would somehow embolden China to go ahead and capture Taiwan, something China has only threatened to do so far for decades. Now, has Donald Trump just written a template of sorts for Taiwan? This is a question that's been buzzing over the weekend, not just in Washington or Taipei, but in Beijing. Trump's operation in Venezuela has shattered an old assumption that regime change, direct intervention, and the forceful removal of a hostile leader are no longer acceptable tools of statecraft. That's evaporated. Trump has shown that assumption to be dangerously outdated. Chinese social media has been abuzz non-stop, openly asking Xi Jinping, the Chinese leadership, to learn from Trump. The argument being made, of course, it's only social media, but the argument being made is blunt. If the US can act unilaterally in Venezuela, why should China hesitate over Taiwan? And this isn't just happening in a vacuum. Just last week, Chinese forces conducted fresh military exercises around Taiwan, not for the first time. Xi Jinping's New Year address left no ambiguity, declaring Taiwan's unification with China unstoppable. Trump's defenders will argue Venezuela and Taiwan are not comparable, legally, strategically, morally. And in some ways they're right, but Trump's defenders will also have to admit that the days of moral, legal, and strategic are somewhat gone, or at least they've changed dramatically. And China is the last country on earth that will act based solely on legal briefs. The only question now is, has Trump pulled a crucial lever that paves the way for the capture of another country, or for the Chinese capture of Taiwan? There's another layer to this. Venezuela's change is also an economic setback for Beijing. China was Venezuela's biggest oil buyer, propping up an allied regime thousands of miles from the Chinese mainland. That leverage is now gone. So yes, this may not trigger an immediate move on Taiwan, but it undeniably shifts the psychological terrain. A difficult, taboo action becomes somehow thinkable now for the Chinese leadership. The question is, can he and will he take Taiwan? Now I want to show you why the taking of Taiwan is actually not that simple at all. China has been showing aggression towards Taiwan for a long time. There has been an unstated mission Taiwan for a very long time. But I want to show you why and how this is really not so simple. For instance, let's go straight to the start. Number one, it is a very, very narrow strait between China and Taiwan. Very violent seas which are not really amenable for direct military action. Amphibious assaults, which would very much be a part of the kind of military operation that China would need to effect in this, have become very, very difficult. Landing sites in Taiwan happen to be on the opposite side of the island. Very few landing beaches. They're all heavily mined. Taiwan will see the invasion coming in early. Satellites, radars, undersea sensors, missile targets, Chinese troop carriers. Airfields are hardened, runways rapidly repaired. So Taiwan is a well-defended island. It's very, very close, as you can see, to the Chinese mainland. But this is a country that has been prepared for decades now for the precise thing that we are talking about right now. Mountains favor defenders, not invaders. Urban warfare could happen in mega cities. I'm talking about the hypotheticals of a Chinese attack on Taiwan. Military has been blended into civilian terrain in different parts of this island. The military in Taiwan is decentralized, which means it's very hard to decapitate. There isn't one command center. There are mobile missile units to hunt Chinese fleets as they advance on Taiwan. Submarines from Taiwan would threaten the supply lines. The first wave of China would suffer very, very heavy losses if it ever came to that. Thousands of casualties in days. China would have to win very fast or fail because a prolonged war would invite an American intervention. I could go on and on detailing layer after layer why the capture of Taiwan is very, very difficult at a tactical level militarily. But has the atmosphere somehow become more amenable now for China to contemplate taking Taiwan? And Einar Tangen, I'd like to come to you on that first. Observers across the board, columns, so many columns have been written saying that the American intervention in Venezuela somehow makes, a Chinese mission in Taiwan more of a possibility or more thinkable. How do you see that?
I see it as incorrect. If you start looking at the actual facts as opposed to the wishful thinking of people from both sides in China and elsewhere, the Chinese have reacted in shock. They've said that they want a return to the international order and rules-based environment, not walking away from it. In terms of Taiwan, nothing has changed. The fact is the mainland will only act if, in two instances, somehow Taiwan declares itself independent, or two, it acquires offensive weapons that can reach Beijing and pose a threat to it. In those cases, the red line is drawn. Now, I appreciate your military analysis, but the white papers from the United States, and one which was just recently leaked, indicate that China would overwhelm the island in a matter of days. What the cost is, I don't know. I'm not a military strategist. I'm merely relying on the very careful and studied analysis that the U.S. does on an annual basis in terms of Chinese capabilities, which have improved. So this idea that somehow, a brave bunch of Taiwanese are going to fight off the might of the PLA, I think that's a little far-fetched, at least by U.S. measures.
Dr. Chelari, China, Taiwan, is that just something people are saying? Has something changed? Will China be looking at the, Trump's actions, not just in Venezuela, but, potentially in other places as somehow a license or a signal to speed up ambitions on Taiwan?
Looking at it more broadly, for nearly 4 years, the world has been hearing lectures from the West about a struggle between democracies versus autocracies.
Yeah.
Between those who believe in a rules-based order versus those who believe in might makes right. And these lectures began right after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And we were told that the world is split between these two camps. Now the developments since last weekend clearly have shown that those who were giving these lectures to the world are the ones who are tearing down a rules-based order. So in that sense, not only are they feeling emboldened to potentially target other countries, but they're also sending the wrong message to Beijing. But the question militarily is, as you know, Shiv, defense is much easier than offense, especially when there's a sea separating China and Taiwan. Offense by China becomes really very difficult because if China had this amphibious capability, not only to invade Taiwan, but to seize Taiwan, Xi Jinping wouldn't be conducting these live fire exercises around Taiwan at regular intervals.
Yeah.
He would actually have done something by now. So I don't think the developments of recent days are going to militarily change the picture, but they do send the wrong message to Beijing. And I think one other point that we need to keep in mind is that the West is in relative decline. In comparison to the other areas, the other countries in the world. its share of global GDP is shrinking, even though the West continues to dominate international institutions. And the MAGA movement of Trump draws its sustenance from America's relative decline, and making America great again is first recognizing that America is no longer great.
Yeah.
That's the reason why the phrase "Make America Great Again" was coined. So today, what we are seeing is a frenzied rush to make America great again, whether by seizing Maduro from Caracas, or by threatening various countries, or by using weaponized trade as Trump has done. But when history is written down the road, these weapons that the Trump administration has fashioned, these weapons are going to accelerate the West's relative decline, especially America's relative decline.
Glenn Carl, the China factor, the signal that goes to China, not just on Taiwan, but even the intervention in Venezuela itself has much to do with China, given that China is the largest importer of Venezuelan oil. How do you read that?
I think several of us have touched upon, and the discussion has circled around what really is the most important lesson or assessment to derive from what's happened in the last several days with Trump and Venezuela. And that is the normative order that I have certainly been a champion of, and that has haltingly shaped the world's affairs since 1945, is, I'm afraid to say, not just moribund, but now something from the past. It's clear, and it has been for several years, but now it's just in the open through the events of Venezuela, that Trump has been inchoately moving toward, but now openly embracing a sphere of influence order. He's had discussions with Vladimir Putin about this that have been quite explicit. And I suspect that he is circling in the same ways in discussions with Xi Jinping, where you'll have 3 or 4, depending how you want to define it, poles in the world, just as you have described. The Americas would be the protected domain of the American imperium, and Asia would be that of Chinese hegemony, or by debating or arguing about the Chinese capability at present to succeed in an invasion, or America's ability to defend it, and so on. The larger story, I think, is that Trump has de facto and may well explicitly in private with Xi come April acknowledge that there are these sphere of affairs, of influence rather. And so Taiwan, if Beijing could do what it wants, it would. But it can't, and it's intelligent and makes a cost-benefit analysis of the downsides to seeking strategic objectives. And at present, the downsides outweigh the upsides. And China may well be able to achieve its objectives without an invasion, which is to bring Taiwan back to the Chinese mainland as an integral part of China. And it will do so. But if it can't, progressively, it will be able to impose its will. And Trump has signaled that he probably is not willing to have people who look like me die for people who look different.
No, I think, I will end this discussion by, at the risk of borrowing a phrase from the Europeans and the Brits tonight, and say that I will continue to monitor this situation very closely. And I will wait for all the facts of this evolving story before we continue to report more on it. But thank you very much, Dr. Brahma Chelani, Aina Tangent, Glenn Carl, Ambassador Meera Shankar, for being with me on this very illuminating discussion on where things are actually going to go next. Thank you very much for being with me tonight. Shame on the government and shame on the judiciary, and I have no hesitation tonight, viewer, in saying these words that, who knows, might get me into trouble. India's most influential rape and murder convict, Gurmeet Ram Rahim, chief of the Dera Sacha Sauda, has been granted his 15th vacation from jail in the last 5 years. A man serving a life sentence for rape and murder with the latest parole manages to spend 406 days outside jail. So this is not parole as much as it is an exception. Let's put the record plainly on the table tonight, viewer. Gurmeet Ram Rahim was sentenced to life imprisonment in 2017. 3 years later, his vacation began. In October 2020, 1 day furlough. In May 2021, 1 day parole. In February 2022, 21 days parole. In June 2022, 30 days parole. In October 2022, 40 days parole. In January 2023, 40 days parole. In July 2023, 40 more days of parole. In November 2023, 21 days parole. In January 2024, 50 days parole. August 2024, 21 days parole. October 2024, 20 days parole. January 2025, 30 days parole. April 2025, 21 days parole. August 2025, 40 days parole. And now January 2026, 40 more days of parole. Add it all up and you get over 400 days outside prison while serving a life sentence for murder and rape. The primary blame lies squarely with the government at the centre and Haryana state. This is political patronage dressed up as legal process, but uncomfortable questions must also be asked of the judiciary, and I will not shy away from asking them. Courts have never denied him parole. And when the Supreme Court was petitioned challenging these repeated releases just 1 year ago, it dismissed the plea saying it targeted an individual rather than a matter of public interest. So tonight I humbly ask the Supreme Court this. Is it not a matter of public interest that an influential rape and murder convict with the power to intimidate witnesses and mobilize massive crowds of followers has effectively been allowed to commute a life sentence into periodic leave? 15 vacations, my friends, in 5 years for a total of 406 days. He has spent a year and a half outside jail since he went behind bars. So sleep well, my friends.
This was one of the most magical, mystical performances we've seen.
This is like a shrine.
Coming and listening to you is like seeing a maestro perform at that shrine.
I think it was when Meow sang himself for the longest Qawwali. Yes, that for me was special.
When the first claps came in, I think my only prayers was all of you should be healed. May God give you a lot of prosperity, health, love, long life.
I was mesmerized.
I think it is one of the most magical evenings that I've spent.
बहुत ही अच्छा.
Beautiful.
Oh my God, A.R. Rahman is unmatchable.
It connected me to some spirituality.
This is India for me. This is India. This India I grew up, and this India I'm seeing now. It will never change.
When you have somebody like an A.R. Rahman, legend, maestro, I don't know which word should we choose. It was just a treat.
Pulling
other opposition parties.
They argue, I conclude. They deflect, I drill down. This isn't a free-for-all. It's a reckoning. No filler, no fog. Only the facts and where they lead. Every night at 9, the case closes because the buck stops here.
The front lines of Kargil. The fury of Operation Sindhu.
So many attacks.
The chaos and cries of disaster zones. To fighter jet cockpits. And the world's most defining interviews.
It's incredible.
He has seen history break. Live, unfiltered. 20,000 hours of live broadcasting.
Welcome to Left, Right and Centre.
Hard facts.
War-struck country.
Hard questions.
In the Ukraine.
30 years of trust.
In the Kargil area. North Ukraine. In France. In Italy. At Srinagar. Vishnu Shom for NDTV.
Vishnu Shom. Only on NDTV.
A very special moment for us as we announce NDTV Masterstroke, the NDTV Art Awards.
NDTV presents the Masterstroke Art Awards, an odyssey of creative brilliance where the masterpiece meets its ultimate recognition.
NDTV bringing this subject forward would have a great integrity of putting it forward where people could understand the importance of art.
This award that is being started, I'm sure is going to be amazing.
Art for India and for Indians is an expression of our Atmanirbharta.
It's actually quite a formidable jury, so I think we'll reveal a lot more as we go along.
This is an amazing platform, I think, today what you're doing.
Honoring the masters who define our creative landscape. Coming soon on the NDTV network.
From the heart of the newsroom to the core of the stories shaping your world. Join me, Gargi Raut, as I track all the developments as they break. Live from the NDTV newsroom, weekdays at 4 p.m.
21 days in Kashmir. People have bombarded me, friends, with requests for an
Hello everybody, you're watching NDTV tonight. Two controversies, one core concern. The debate around Umar Khalid and Sharjeel Imam brings back questions of dissent, accountability and more importantly, national security. At the same time, the Bangladesh IPL controversy also pulls spot into the larger debate of nationalism and security in the midst of rising India-Bangladesh tensions. That's what we debate in the course of the next few minutes. But first up, the headlines. The Supreme Court of India has denied bail to Umar Khalid and Sharjeel Imam in the ongoing 2020 Northeast Delhi riots case under the stringent UAPA law. In fact, the bench held that the material placed on record prima facie suggested a central role for both in the alleged larger conspiracy, meaning the statutory conditions for bail were not really met at this stage. At the same time, the court granted bail to 5 other co-accused, Gulfisha Fatima, Miran Haider, Shiv Aroor, Mohammad Salim Khan and Shadab Ahmed on the basis that their roles have appeared less central and thus warranted conditional release. Now, the court also clarified that delay in trial alone is not sufficient to grant bail under UAPA. It emphasized that each bail plea must be considered on its own merits. So the big question we ask today, how can a democracy protect national security without turning dissent into punishment? A short while ago, I spoke to former Solicitor General of India, Harish Salve, and this is what he said. Former Solicitor General of India, Harish Salve, joins us now. Thank you, Mr. Salve, for your time. How do you look at the Supreme Court's judgment today? If bail is the rule and jail is the exception, how does the Supreme Court justify years of incarceration under UAPA when the trial hasn't even begun?
You confuse so many different idioms, but not your fault. You're not a lawyer. Jail is the exception, bail is the rule in normal law. We have statutory exceptions to this principle. In the old IPC, section 302, jail was the rule, bail was the exception, because the accused had to establish that there was no case. It was not for the prosecution to establish that the accused had to be kept inside. So these are good general catchphrases, but they don't set out the law accurately. So this is what happens. The UAPA has provisions. The drug law, the anti-drug law, has provisions like that. There are a number of statutes in which bail is not the rule. Bail is the exception, jail is the rule, if one may put it in a catchphrase. So the burden is very high, and accused has to show there is no case made. That is a high bar. There is an entirely independent ground that if a trial is being delayed, the bail should normally be granted.
Okay.
The purpose of incarceration, pre-trial incarceration, partly is preventive. If there is a fear or concern that if bail is granted, there will be witness tampering, there will be interference with the course, or the events may repeat themselves. And that is where the balancing comes in. Now, undoubtedly, unconscionable delay in commencement or prosecution of a trial is a very strong ground, but it's quite another matter where 3 courts have now found concurrently that the delay was at the door of as much as of the accused. And many times accused are in no tearing hurry to get on with the trial for good reason. And these are what we call in the criminal court, these are forensic ploys. Many times you don't want to go on. You don't want to go on with framing the charges. You want to see what happens, etc., etc. So if those are the things which are in play and which have caused the delay, then this principle of prolonged incarceration doesn't apply. See, the state is under a duty to have quick, efficient trials. Forget this case. In any case, criminal trials should not be kept hanging because there is a mental price you pay for a criminal case pending against you. Yeah. So speedy justice is a rule under Article 21, but many times the accused, so if there is absence, if there is no judge present, if the judge has gone missing, if the prosecution is not showing up, those are cases of extended incarceration. Here where the fault on balance lies more on the, as much if not more on the accused as it does on the prosecution. Then that principle doesn't come into play. So that's why I said you mixed up 2 idioms.
Okay.
Bail, not jail, is one.
Okay, so that was a good clarification. But Mr. Salve, in the last many years, we've seen that Supreme Court has often nudged the government to do away with the colonial sedition law, which some people are now saying is back in disguise in the form of the new criminal laws. Courts have been ruling out that even shouting certain slogans, I don't want to say those slogans now, is not an act against the country. So how does any speech attract UAPA to keep individuals in jail for a long time?
2 short answers. Context matters. Societal context matters. The time you see, there was a strong argument against death penalty. For abolition, there was a strong pro-abolition argument. With the advent of terrorism, that argument has fallen away.
Yes.
So you cannot view these things divorced from the context of the times. Secondly, I have only read the Supreme Court judgment cursorily. I have not analyzed it in great detail. I know nothing about this case before I read this judgment. The court has said that it is not just a speech. It is a course of conduct. The speeches were a part of the overall course of conduct. And the course of conduct was clearly within the meaning of the unlawful acts. So sedition is a side issue here. It's terrorism within the meaning of the unlawful act, and the Supreme Court has construed the phrase by any other means. So the whole discussion is very different. I'm surprised who's talking about sedition here.
Right. Sir, I know you've touched upon this. The 2020 Delhi riots have been the worst form of violence that the capital witnessed since 1984 anti-Sikh riots. In both these instances, In both these cases, we did see that police action came under a lot of scrutiny. But the larger criticism is that in the 2020 Delhi riots cases, there was an impression that accountability focused a lot on intent and speeches. What kind of lessons do you think the state, agencies and administration need to learn from this episode?
In 1984, was there any action? I'm not aware of any action. Prior to certain actions, the only time actually, first time where riots have been prosecuted was the Gujarat case.
Yeah.
Post-Gujarat riots. And of course, the narrative is nobody prosecuted in Gujarat, but the only time where prosecutions have been laid is, look at Bombay.
Yeah.
1992 riots, one of the worst, 93 January riots, one of the worst ever in the history of India. Are you aware of any prosecutions?
No.
I'm not. In fact, there was one prosecution where somebody was caught with a automatic rifle, and even that was withdrawn.
Yes.
So, when people give lectures on prosecution, etc., it's no use. Let's talk about this.
Yeah.
The FIR was registered in Jan 2020. I think the first charge sheet was filed pretty early by November 2020. So I think it was all fairly quick. And it was, the court has said it's a complex investigation. See, these investigations which are trying to unravel, look at what's going on in our neighborhood. Look what's going on in Bangladesh. Look at what happened a while ago in Burma. And look at what happened in Sri Lanka. Look at what happened in Nepal. There are people who want that playbook to play in India. Now, you may strongly feel that a particular government should go. You may strongly feel the system of order is wrong, etc. But laws are made to protect society. And if you cross those lines, you pay the price.
Right. Sir, just an offshoot from my earlier question, how fair can riot trials in India truly be? Because, I've seen both sides holding deeply polarized views. So in that case, how can courts balance the demand of security? It's just not a demand, it's a responsibility, duty of the state with principles of justice.
Fortunately for us, the court doesn't have to deal with the kind of debates you see on TV channels. The court is concerned with evidence. The law is clear. The interpretation has been given by any other purpose. Supreme Court has said that's an unlawful activity. They have said prima facie, if all this is correct, then this would be unlawful activity. And if the evidence is there, the conviction happens. Thereafter, you can continue having debates on TV whether India has fair laws or unfair laws.
Right.
But today, one can debate anything. There are people who justify going into another country, grabbing their president, putting him in handcuffs and bringing him in. All sorts of things are going on. So we don't want to, those are academic debates we can have on different fora, on TV and in speeches and saying India has become illiberal, etc., etc. I want my India to be safe. I want my India not to suffer. We are an island of democracy today. We have failed states all around us. We don't want to go down that road.
Absolutely. One of my last questions to you, Mr. Salve, a few days ago, we also saw the new mayor of New York, Zohran Mamdani, writing to Omar Khalid saying that he remembers him. There were also other congressmen who talked about, a speedy trial in this case. Do these international incidents, developments also have any impact on Indian judicial processes?
So I don't think so. I think Mr. Mamdani has his plate quite full trying to fix what's gone wrong with minorities in his own speeches where minorities are treated appallingly in his country, right? I think they should all focus on that.
Okay. And one last
we have
question.
more, our courts and our citizenry and our media, all of us are strong enough to keep India's democracy ticking. We don't need Americans and their system of extradition, their system of trial, their system of police atrocities. We can also go on and on about them, but why? You be happy in your country, let me be happy in mine.
Right. Last question.
And Mr. Mamdani, best of luck dealing with New York's discrimination.
Okay. So you think no impact of that, but even on public pressure?
Irrelevant. They are completely irrelevant, and I think they should be treated with the contempt they deserve.
Okay. And so the timeline of 1 year that has been set for the accused to appeal, is that usual?
Not appeal. It happened many times. If you are sitting in a court, you know this as a practicing lawyer, sitting in a court, so many times the court says too early, come back after 6 months, come back. It's not time.
Yeah.
It is, you're giving 1 more year. If in that time also, now with this crack of the whip by the Supreme Court saying stop procrastination, Do not allow the accused to play these games. Trial court, please crack on. It's a message to the trial court that within 1 year's time, you should have crossed at least all the protected witnesses. Then the court will see what is the evidence which has come on record, how far has it got. If it is satisfied that it has got to a place and there's even stronger evidence, it may not grant him bail. If it feels that it is now safe to grant, see, this is not punitive incarceration. So if you feel now there's no damage he can do, even if he's let out, he'll be let out.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Salve, for your time and for speaking to NDTV. Thank you, sir. Now, for the other side, Ashwini Kumar, former law minister, joins us now. Thank you, Mr. Kumar, for speaking to NDTV. You heard Mr. Salve. Now, when the case is all about an alleged planned role in Delhi riots, can a long time in jail alone be enough to justify bail under an anti-terror law? By giving bail to some accused and not to the others, many feel that the court has shown that each case is judged on its own facts and not as a group, and that many feel is a good thing.
Well, the Supreme Court, in a series of judgments, have said that the accused have a fundamental right to speedy trial, and long incarceration without conviction is in itself a very major consideration in the exercise of judicial discretion to grant or not to grant bail. And this principle must hold true in all statutory instances, whether it is UAPA or PMLA. There have been a series of judgments in special statutory enactments also, where the court has said that Article 21 must have primacy over all statutory provisions when it comes to the liberty and dignity and privacy and reputation of an individual. And that has been the jurisprudence of this country, and that is the core of Indian democratic ethos. The fundamental aspect that you need to consider in this case is, why could the prosecution not bring home the guilt of the accused for 5 long years? Leave aside bringing home the guilt of the accused, not even begin the trial for 5 years. And is there a recompense for the loss of liberty of an individual who is merely suspected of a crime but is eventually acquitted? Who will be responsible for that loss of freedom? Please remember that in all the jurisprudential debates, whether it relates to a criminal statute or whether it relates to any other criminal provision,
right,
one fundamental aspect can never be lost sight of. Judiciary, particularly the constitutional courts, are meant to mediate between the citizen and the state when it comes to matters of liberty and fundamental rights. Who is responsible for bringing home the guilt of the accused? Beyond doubt, it is the prosecution. If the prosecution has not been able to do so for 5.5 long years, must an accused suffer? That's the principal question. Now, what is surprising in this otherwise very eloquently written judgment is the court's observation that it is not persuaded that the long detention has crossed the threshold of constitutional impermissibility. These are the words from the judgment. Now, pray, ask the court, where is the threshold of constitutional permissibility laid down? It is laid down in the exercise of their discretion and by the exercise of their discretion. And that is why now the court has said, we give you 1 year to expeditiously try the case, and then liberty is granted to the accused to apply for the bail. Okay. Now, this is nothing but an exercise of discretion. I ask myself the question, why could the court not have said that 5 years long incarceration without bringing home the guilt of the accused is good enough? That's the threshold. And we will not allow further detention of these people without even a trial, leave aside conviction. Right. That should have been, in my respectful submission, and I say so with the utmost deference to the highest constitutional court, for which I have great respect, that should have been the discretion that the court ought to have exercised. Therefore, one other point which I want to make, please remember, India is no banana republic. India is a sovereign democratic country of 140 billion people. The question remains, can 2, 4, 5, 10 people accused of harboring designs to disrupt the unity of India challenge the constitutional conscience of the country? The question is, right now, with all the offenses arraigned against them, they are merely accused.
Right.
Nothing has even begun.
Right.
Therefore, they should get the benefit of the constitutional conscience of the Constitution.
Mr. Kumar, valid point here, but you also heard Mr. Salve, and there are many experts who believe that in cases linked to national security, and this is one such case, it is reasonable for law to put public safety over personal liberties, at least till the trial is completed. So, I mean, I know you're talking about a balance here, you're talking about something that needs to be done, but you just heard Mr. Salve, who says that, India is an island of democracy, and there are countries going completely berserk with protests all around us. So this is about national safety, national security, and keeping our citizens safe. So how will you even counter an argument like that?
Well, I don't comment on individuals. I have my own views, and my view is absolutely clear. The routine invocation of national security can never be a justification in a true democracy to deny people their freedoms. Where is the democracy without the freedoms of the citizens? The state exists for the citizen. The citizen does not exist for the state. It is the citizen and the individuals who have consented to confer authority on the state in the interest of both collective security and collective good of the people. But if in the process the state itself becomes oblivious to the need to safeguard and protect and zealously preserve the liberties of individuals, then I think there is a question mark on democracy itself. Substantive democracy is about rights. It is about fundamental rights. It cannot be about a criminal justice system where the process itself becomes the punishment. Please ask yourself this question, which I do all the time. Is there a recompense for the 5 years of lost liberty of these people in case they are acquitted? There isn't. So if there is no recompense for an injury, it is better to minimize that injury on your own citizens rather than to perpetuate that injury. So why is it that a citizen has to knock at every single door, at every level of the judicial process for just the freedom to be? Yes, I can understand heinous crimes of any nature must be punished. There is logic in the retribution system of criminal law, but it is only after the guilt is established, not before. What happens to the presumption of innocence? What happens to the principle that bail is the rule and jail is an exception? What happens to the sacrosanct principle of constitutional law in this country, that Article 21 is at the pinnacle in the hierarchy of fundamental rights, and all statutory provisions have to be interpreted to be in consonance with the spirit and letter of Article 21. This is the judgments of the Supreme Court in several cases.
Right.
This particular judgment seems to be diluting that principle, and that is my difficulty with this judgment.
Absolutely. Mr. Kumar, thank you so much for making those points. Former Law Minister Ashwini Kumar there. Thank you so much for joining us. We're also joined by Arfa Khanum. She's a journalist and a writer. We also have Tuhin Sinha of the BJP. Thank you both of you for being part of this broadcast. Tuhin, to you first. You heard both sides. Critics have been saying that the UAPA, a law today, is being used as an investigative tool to deny bail. Rather, it's being used as an exceptional law to deal with, with cases that are being seen as terror cases. Delhi riots have been worse since 1984. The police action is facing sharp criticism. What have we to learn from this entire episode?
And good evening, Vasudha. Good evening, everybody. I think it's a very calibrated, very cogent, very fine judgment. And anybody who still backs, the likes of Omar Khalid after that, obviously is a self-professed urban Naxal. The point is just two sentences, just 2 points of the judgment sum up the core, the core essence of the judgment. One, where Section 15 of UAPA, is defined. defining a terrorist act, apart from death or destruction, the provision encompasses act that disrupt services and threat to the economy. So you can, when I finish, you can just play out the speeches of Sharjeel Imam and whether they amounted to disrupting the economy and disrupting the integrity of the country or not. Number two, it becomes necessary to examine each appeal independently. The record discloses that all the appellants do not stand on equal footing and on culpability, and that is where the prime culprits, which are the two men, have been given a greater hierarchy in that entire process. Now there are three takeaways from this whole thing. Number one, it reiterates India's judicial integrity. No woke alliance, no global woke alliance can intimidate us. The likes of Mamdani, who were writing letters, I don't know for what, casting aspersions on judicial system. I think it's a message to them. It's a message to the Islamist ecosystem in India. And of course, it's a message to the Congress party, because three top lawyers defending the culprits belong to the Congress party: Kapil Sibal, Abhishek Manu Singhvi, and Salman Khurshid. And I think today Congress party, and especially Rahul Gandhi, owes an apology to the country for the 50 deaths which resulted due to the Delhi riots. They could have been stopped.
Right. Arfa, under India's terror law, I know that both sides have very powerful arguments in this, but if the court sees early material suggesting a key role of a larger plot, it gets bound by law to refuse bail at this stage. So what do we have a problem with? Is it the law or is it the process?
Vasudha, first of all, it is really a dark day for Indian democracy, and I feel disappointed as a citizen who still believes that India runs on rule of law. I believe there can be no democracy without the right to liberty, the fundamental right that has been guaranteed by the Constitution of India, and leave aside, the largest democracy of the world that we are as India. But even in a small country, or even in any decent society or democracy, you cannot take away anyone's right to basic liberty and freedom. Now tell me, 5 years and 10 months in jail without an iota of evidence or witnesses being produced in the court of law. The case has not begun. Now tell me, your BJP spokesperson was saying that how it is a conspiracy, and the message, I think the only message we are trying to send to the Muslim community, which has lived on the margins of Indian democracy, which has been at the receiving end of every politics and political action and the policies of Modi government, that if you challenge the mighty government, if you challenge the so-called, strong prime minister and any policy that he makes, and if you try to assert your right to basic citizenship, if you assert your rights as a citizen, then you will be punished. I think Umar Khalid and Sharjeel Imam, by detaining them in jail for more than 5 years, this is the message. Are you trying to send this message to the young Muslims that they are not equal citizens? They cannot disagree with the government. There is no right to dissent in this country. There is no right to free speech in this country. That you will be now remain in jail on grounds. I mean, if 5 years is not the red line, I am so sorry to say, when exactly are you going to really stop at? If 5 years is not
this
enough,
matter was in the court. Are you suggesting that today...
Vasudha, another very important thing.
Yeah, please finish your point.
Yeah, there's a very important thing I want to say, Vasudha, that tomorrow, when the trial begins and the court finds out that these gentlemen, Sharjeel and Umar, were innocent, who is going to really return those 5 prime years of their youth? Sharjeel and both Umar, they both are, intellectuals. The courts themselves have said that they are really clever gentlemen, clever men. And who is going to return? Who is going to really return the prime of their youth to them? They would be,
Alpha, are you suggesting that the processes that we saw today in the court, the judicial processes, these decisions are not free from public pressure or even political pressure? Is that what you're suggesting?
I mean, I'm not saying that the courts are working under pressure. I'm not trying to question the judicial wisdom. What I'm trying to question here is that this is a complete failure of the state. The state has failed in starting the trial, filing the charge sheet on time, and, giving enough evidence. I mean, only when the trial starts, then the evidence and the witnesses will be produced in court. So it may not be the failure of the court. I am not questioning their judgment. What I'm trying to question is the intention and the failure of the state in starting this whole case. I'm saying if Umar Khalid is guilty, अगर उमर खालिद ने कोई गलती की है आप फांसी पे चढ़ा दीजिए उमर खालिद को शर्जील इमाम को, but at least let the case begin. Okay. That's the only thing I want to say here, and I am saying here as somebody who covered the anti-CAA NRC protests that this sends the chilling message down the spine of everyone who was even remotely associated with the CAA NRC movement, that if you try to assert your right as a citizen of India, this is the fate that you are going to meet. Okay. You are essentially
that's an important point, and also the crux of the critics' argument, but also this question that Arfa is asking also leads to another question, because when trials get delayed endlessly, evidence becomes, largely circumstantial.
No, Vasudha,
there could be charge sheets running into thousands of pages. Then it's very realistic that the accused practically stands. They may not really stand a chance.
I think, right? Vasudha, you should have called out the falsehood of my counterpart over here, but let me call out the falsehood over here. If the trial is delayed, it is not because of the prosecution. It is because of the lawyers of the accused who have been repeatedly seeking adjournments. And let me just read out one paragraph which will validate my point. This is from the judgment passed in the High Court in the Taslim Ahmed case, accused in Delhi riots. Now, I'm just reading one paragraph which will prove the point why the trial has been delayed. A bare perusal of the order sheets clearly indicate that the learned counsel for the accused have taken many adjournments during the course of the arguments on charge. The order sheets show that the learned counsel for the accused were not ready to argue the matter on charge, thereby protracting the proceedings. And this thing has been called out at least on two or three.
The former Chief Justice of India has also spoken on this, Arfa. What would your remarks be? Because there have been multiple statements saying that this is not the investigator's fault. It's just that the accused, the lawyers have been asked for repeated adjournments.
No, but just reply to one question. Just reply to one question that I'm asking, that why did the police took so long in filing a charge sheet? I mean, the law demands that it should be filed within the period of 6 months. Tell me what exactly, if there are really solid evidence, against Umar Khalid and Sharjeel Imam and rest of the people who are accused in the case. And I want to remind you, Scroll did a fantastic report when they said the whole case is not starting, it's not beginning the trial. The police and the state is hesitant in starting the trial because the whole case stands on sand. They literally, the so-called protected witnesses, they literally interviewed them, and many of them did not even know who the accused were. I would urge the BJP spokesperson, if he really believes in equality and fairness and rule of law, to please...
But Arfa, the fact that two of them did not get bail, the others did, would make any common person think that this is happening too repeatedly to even think that there could be some discrimination or bias against these two people. Tuhin Sinha.
I just have one point. If the charge sheet has got delayed, it's an exceptional case. Probably, it would not get delayed now that BNS has been implemented. So, there are stricter norms now. It has got delayed. That's another thing. But point is, when Arfa says, if they are guilty, you hang them, I just want her to comment on the videos which are playing out of these two young men. Does she condone those thoughts? Does she condone, one person saying that the chicken neck should be broken away because, there is a Muslim majority that would help us break the chicken neck away? Does she condone that, India has forcibly occupied Kashmir? I think she also needs to take a stand. If these things are not condemnable, if these things should not be censured, if these things should not be punished, then what should be the punishment criteria?
Arfa?
No, I don't have to agree with everything that Sharjeel and Umar have said in order to defend their basic right to liberty. I do not have to agree with everything they said. I think that was very stupid of them, stupid of Sharjeel to have said this. I don't agree with anything he said in that statement, but we can debate over this. He's a young man. He tried to say something. If this is illegal, he should be punished. I don't have to agree with everything they say, but is it terrorism? Does it, only the lawyers can you tell you, only the people who really know. I am not an expert on law, but at least I can tell you that I don't agree, and majority of the Muslims and even people who are non-Muslims do not agree with what he said. It's a stupid statement made by a young man. He might regret after making that statement, but is it terrorism? Does the court of law define it as terrorism?
Right.
Does he deserve to land in jail without trial for more than 5 years for making that statement? That's my question. And also, I want to remind you, Tuhin, that when this whole riots, the Delhi riots broke out, Sharjeel was already in jail. And what we are discussing right now is not the statement that Sharjeel had made. What we are discussing the FIR 59, which is related to Delhi riots.
Right. Tuhin Sinha.
Well, the statements are just the icing on the cake. We know for a fact the kind of person that he is. Fact is...
No, because she's not agreeing with the statement. She's saying that it's a stupid statement, but does it deserve, does it make somebody deserve to be in jail for almost 5 years without trial? That's the larger question.
The statement merely...
Or will it be defined as terrorism? Will it be defined as terrorism?
The statement merely gives an idea of his mindset. Fact is that there is concrete evidence of, the involvement, of the deep involvement of both of them by way of inflammatory speeches, number one, and mobilization efforts in being the intellectual architects of the riots, Delhi riots, which were timed at a time to bring international dispute to India, and which eventually led to the merciless death of 50 Hindus. I think that is the grave charge over here, if Arfa does not remember that.
Arfa, the larger question is also a very mass-driven argument, and it's also an important thing that national safety, security is the duty of the state, and they would want to keep all external anti-national forces at bay. How can you even respond to that kind of... Because, the legal processes are on one side. What about the larger mass sentiment, the public pressure, and the fact that these two men have been repeatedly denied bail for a long time, and the fact that they've made speeches which all of us agree have been extremely problematic?
Vasudha, I'm sorry to inform your viewers that, neither of you have really described that during Delhi riots, out of the 52 people who were killed, 2/3 of them were Muslims. There were mosques which were burned, there were mazars which were burned, there were Muslim businesses which got affected. Muslims got largely affected and impacted, and their houses were burned, their shops were burned, and now only Muslims are being accused in initiating and being key conspirators in this case. Tell me, even if you don't know any law, I am not an expert on law, but at least I have common sense. And I urge your viewer to judge by themselves. That
That's important. Tuhin Sinha, the victims of Delhi riots were not just Hindus, Muslims also died, Muslims also suffered. So why make it just about identity?
2/3.
I would not, let us not get into, I think riots are more about numbers. It's about, the way you have impacted the psyche of an entire city. But fact is that, if there was retaliation from Hindus, we all know what happened on the first, second and third days. And, and as unfortunate as it was, from the fourth day onwards, there
that would also raise questions on policing, right?
Well, absolutely. Absolutely. Nobody can deny the accountability of the Delhi police. I only wish there was somebody from the Congress also on your show, because the way three senior leaders, like I mentioned, of the Congress party have been defending these two culprits, it really raises serious question marks over the intent of the Congress party when it comes to national security. And I'm, there are reasons obviously why the Congress party must have chickened out and not been a part of this debate.
Right. Arfa, it's all about national security, and it's important that we safeguard that at the cost of everything else.
I am just saying, Vasudha, that the demand of our common sense, and that's why I'm urging not the BJP spokesperson, but your viewers, and I'm assuming that they are the citizens who want to hold the government to account, first of all, by delaying filing the charge sheet. So this is the failure of the state. Number two, I'm saying it fails common sense that in a riot where 2/3 of the numbers of the people who were victim of this riots were Muslims, and now the key conspirators are also Muslim. Now imagine this gentleman who's now a minister in Delhi government. He was the one who made on camera, he made inflammatory speeches. Him and his team turned the whole, the protest site into, the rioting actually began on the protest site. Nothing happened to him. He's now this honorable minister. He's not being brought
I don't
to
think the
court of
protests were
law.
completely peaceful, because all of us do remember that the protests were not completely peaceful. Tuhin Sinha.
Sadly, my counterpart,
the rioting, Vasudha, only started when this gentleman...
My counterpart sadly exemplifies woke hypocrisy. When you criticize the state for the delay in filing the charge sheet, to retain your own moral uprightness, you should first, call out the machinations, the vile intent of Sharjeel Imam and Khalid Umar. I never see you do that. There are so often you have called out Hindu symbolisms being used in Indian Parliament, but when a Mamdani takes his oath on Quran, you call it freedom of speech. So I think the woke ecosystem needs to get out of its hypocrisy before we take them seriously on their criticism of the lapses in the case. It's as simple as that.
Alpha, very quickly respond to that. Are the left liberals selective in their use of symbolism?
How funny it is, Vasudha. It's funny, Vasudha, that we were discussing the Delhi riot case, we were discussing Umar Khalid and Sharjeel Imam and the NTCA and RC protest, and your friend from the BJP brings in New York. What I'm trying to say here is that not just Mamdani
we're discussing hypocrisy
on Quran, but every single the majority of the Hindu senators and representatives in the United States, they have also taken oath on Gita or whichever other book they believed in. So I am not against people following their religion. I am only against people discriminating, the leaders, the political leaders discriminating people based on the religion. I am not against Mr. Modi or Mr. Yogi Adityanath or our friend Tuhin in following their religion. We can do whatever we want to do, and the whole, the freedom of religion is also given to us by Indian Constitution, and there, in New York by the Constitution of the United States.
Okay.
So I see nothing
quick
wrong.
word, Tuhin, closing remarks from you, because the Supreme Court has managed to keep the country safe while maybe trying to strike the balance, and at least also leading to a little bit of disappointment when it comes to personal liberties. Or are you completely happy with what the Supreme Court has said today?
No, it's a benchmark decision. I think it's a decision which will be referred to in a very long time on issues of national security. And of course, it's a very sad day for the global woke alliance, those who thought that international pressure could intimidate our judiciary. I think hats off to our judiciary for taking a very calibrated, very cogent view on the entire thing.
Okay, thank you so much, both of you, for joining me on this broadcast. Tuhin Sinha of the BJP and Arfa Khanum Sherwani, journalist there. Thank you, both of you, for joining me on the broadcast. Meanwhile, moving on to the other topic now, Bangladesh has now indefinitely banned the IPL, the streaming of IPL, and is even asking for T20 World Cup matches to be shifted out of India, turning what began as a cricket controversy into a clear diplomatic statement. Now, the flashpoint was the backlash in India over Mustafizur Rahman's IPL inclusion at a time when the anger is already high over attacks on Hindus in Bangladesh. Cricket once again is doing the talking, not just about sports, but also about pressure, pride and protests. Meanwhile, violence against Hindus in Bangladesh has only escalated. A 40-year-old Hindu woman was allegedly gang raped by two men today, who also tied her to a tree and cut off her hair in central Bangladesh's Kaliganj, which is a sub-district of Janada. This is after 4 Hindu men have been killed in different instances in the past 2 weeks. The big question, when violence and injustice are being flagged across the border, can cricket carry on as normal, or does looking away send out the wrong message? That's what we discuss in the course of the next few minutes. We're joined by Boria Majumdar, consulting editor, NDTV. We also have Tushar Gupta, political analyst. Boria, to you first. Can sports be kept separately when there's so much anger against attacks on Hindus across the border? Or does silence risk appearing insensitive to injustice? Or do you think that it's a bad call?
You see, firstly, it's a political call. I mean, your headline is politicization of sport ? I don't think politicization of sport is anything new. It gets politicized every day for the last 100 years. This is the biggest lie that we always face, that, oh, you know what, sport and politics are getting mixed. Of course they will get mixed, because sport allows for protest. Sport is one of those things which will get you eyeballs. I mean, and sport and politics have always been bedfellows. You can debate the Mustafizur Rahman call by the BCCI, good or bad. Clearly, it's not a BCCI call. Has to be a government call in discussion with the MEA or the Ministry of Home Affairs. Otherwise, a cricket body cannot go and take that call. Number two, where I have problems with, if Bangladesh responded to that and said, look, it's a political call by the Indian board, and we are also responding in a political manner and saying we are pulling out. Fair enough. But what did they say? They said security. Did they ever say security till the time BCCI took this call? No. Was there a travel advisory for their fans to come to India? No. Was there a call that Mustafizur Rahman will not play the IPL before the BCCI took the call? No. As of now, if you go to Book My Show just now and check tickets for the Bangladesh-West Indies match and other matches in Calcutta, they are still being sold. I am told 3,000 people have already bought tickets, out of which more than 1,000 plus will be from Bangladesh. What about these fans? Are you even bothered? In this politicization that you are talking about between Bangladesh and India, ultimately the fan will once again lose out, who will never ever be taken seriously by anyone. So clearly, I have problems with the security issue. The security issue is certainly not true. It is a blatant lie. What is true is it is a political response to India stopping Mustafizur Rahman from coming, because the Bangladesh government, with the elections impending, cannot be seen to be soft. So they are trying to respond to India and meet India eye to eye, using that security cover as a veil, because in reality, neither Kolkata nor Mumbai or in any part of in India do you have any kind of security concern.
Right, but but what kind of impact does it have on the cricket in Bangladesh and also the cricket in India? India is still understand because we're a large country, but BCB taking a position like this, was it expected?
See, in India, as far as the BCCI is concerned, nothing will happen. If you ask me in terms of impact, what is the economic impact of this? Zero. Does Indian cricket or even IPL depend for a single dollar on Bangladesh? The answer is no. Will the ICC face a logistical nightmare? Yes. Economic impact? Zero. Coming to Bangladesh, if India now responds saying India will not go to Bangladesh in September, the Bangladesh board stands to get a windfall if there is an Indian tour. In fact, the whole world does, whether it's England, whether it's Australia, whether it's Bangladesh. So in terms of economic impact, obviously the impact on Bangladesh cricket is considerably more than on India. Having said that, with the elections coming, the political class is much more focused on protecting their own interests rather than looking at the sport and Bangladesh. Because from what we know, the BCB did not want to take the call. It was rather imposed on them by the political establishment of the country.
So it's a political call in both countries. Tushar Gupta, is cricket being used here as a pressure tactic? Because I don't really understand the call that they've taken. Why should players, and this applies to even artists, why should these people be made to carry the burden of political and diplomatic tensions? What's happening is immensely sad. We have to use the right kind of platforms to send out the right message. But why should players and sports men be asked to carry this burden?
A part of it has to do with the market forces. The market forces, that is the viewers and the sponsors, have made the IPL what it is. And if the same viewers, and if partially the sponsors as well, do not like the idea of Bangladeshi cricketers being a part of the IPL, irrespective of the religion, I think the board or the government will have to take a call. Now, we often think that sports and politics are not intertwined, but that's a lie we keep telling ourselves. You go back to the 2003 World Cup. For instance, England decided not to go to Zimbabwe for the game. New Zealand also wanted to have India and Australia quit their games in Zimbabwe. But that political coloring has always happened. Now, the problem is we draw a causality between.
But does it work, Tushar Gupta? Does it really work?
No, it's not. It's not about working or not working. It's about just sending out the statement. Now, I'll give you an example. We tend to draw causality that if all is well in sports, it might reflect in politics. And that was the intention with which we had the Pakistani players in the IPL's first season. The same intention with which 2011 semi-final between India and Pakistan was such a huge diplomatic event. We tend to draw that causality that maybe if all is well on the sporting field, everything be well in politics. But that doesn't really work out. So to say that Mustafizur Rahman not coming to India will somehow change the dynamics of Hindus Bangladesh, it won't. What is going on with Hindus in Bangladesh has absolutely no link to Mustafizur Rahman's participation in the IPL. But at the end of the day, these are market forces that the BCCI will also have to acknowledge. My only problem is if you had to take a call like this in the after 20 days after the auction, why allow him in the auction in the first place?
Right.
Why send out a wrong message to the team owners? They were not just Shah Rukh Khan's team, there were 4 other teams bidding for Mustafizur Rahman. You are misleading the team owners then. That is where my problem with the BCCI is.
Right. Thank you both of you for joining me on this broadcast. If issues of violence and injustice are brushed aside, sporting ties alone won't hold relationship together. We need to send out a message, an honest message, and that matters because ignoring injustice only hardens positions tomorrow. But at the same time, should we let our sportsmen and women take the burden of political and diplomatic tensions? Well, not so much. With that, it's time for a short break. More news and updates on the other side.
Across the country, he has tracked the pulse of power from Washington to Korea, witnessed history being made in global capitals and conflict zones, brought clarity to complex issues of national security and international affairs. Aditya Raj Kaul, covering international affairs like no one else, only on NDTV network.
What seems settled for me is unfinished business. So I rewind, I pause, I reflect, I dig until what's buried stands up to be counted. Breaking ground, not just headlines, the meaning behind them. This is Breaking Ground with me, Vedika Sood.
I don't sugarcoat. I shoot straight and tell you stories the way they need to be told. Unfiltered, unafraid, unmissable. That's how I roll. Watch me, Priyanka Deo, on NDTV World. Namaste.
Every winter, the World Economic Forum at Davos becomes the world's thinking room, where power, policy and purpose converge, where the future is examined and reimagined. In January 2026, NDTV will be at the heart of this conversation. NDTV Ignite at Davos, this January on the NDTV network.
Mumbai are bringing our first India tour in your city. Rag on with Shankar Ehsan Loy and Siddharth Mahadevan and Shivam Mahadevan. 5 times melody, 5 times masti with NDTV Good Times. Go grab your tickets on Live Your City by Fever.
It is Asia's richest civic body. 2026 begins with Big Bang BMC Port. High stakes Mumbai battle loading. Can BJP extend Maha winning streak? Existential fight for the Sena. Can the Congress strike a comeback? Maha civic body, massive implications. NDTV tracks the Maha buildup, battleground BMC.
Are you ready for the best show in town? NDTV Golf Pro-Am, we are coming to your city. Stay tuned.
All right, team, our new order show is ready. Now we need a promo. Something cool, something sharp.
Well, I'm sure we'll be having outstanding reviews, solid suggestions,
Expert advice, the latest trends. It's a lot simpler. We'll help people make the right auto decisions. It's got the cool stuff, geeky stuff, serious stuff, all of it, so that you can discover, decide, and drive. I'm Siddharth Sharma, and I am your Automate.
This was one of the most magical, mystical performances we've seen.
This is like a shrine.
Coming and listening to you is like seeing a maestro perform at that shrine.
I think it was when Meow sang himself for the longest Qawwali. Yes, that for me was special.
Welcome back. Let's take a look at other big stories of the day. Battleground Tamil Nadu escalates. Home Minister Amit Shah's sunrise jibe at Chief Minister's M.K. Stalin. Meanwhile, all eyes on TVK's next move. Is Congress flirting with Vijay is the big question. US strikes on Venezuela and the capture of its president Nicolas Maduro has sent fresh shockwaves far beyond Latin America, all the way to Greenland, where Donald Trump's latest remarks need Greenland for national security are being read as a signal for what could come next. Karnataka stabbing horror. A 30-year-old Dalit woman has been stabbed to death. The accused was found dead in the forest. It's time for a short break. My colleague Vishnu joins you on the other side.
Pulling us into this country.
They argue, I conclude. They deflect, I drill down. Stop. This isn't a free-for-all. It's a reckoning. No filler, no fog. Only the facts and where they lead. Every night at 9, the case closes because the buck stops here.
The front lines of Kargil. The fury of Operation Sindhu.
So many attacks.
The chaos and cries of disaster zones. To fighter jet cockpits. And the world's most defining interviews.
It's incredible.
He has seen history break. Live, unfiltered. 20,000 hours of live broadcasting.
Welcome to Left, Right and Centre.
Hard facts.
War-struck country.
Hard questions.
In the Ukraine.
30 years of trust.
In the Kargil area. North Ukraine and France.
In Italy.
At Srinagar.
Vishnu Shom for NDTV.
Vishnu Shom. Only on NDTV.
A very special moment for us as we announce NDTV Master Stroke, the NDTV Art Awards.
NDTV presents the Master Stroke Art Awards. An odyssey of creative brilliance where the masterpiece meets its ultimate recognition.
NDTV bringing this subject forward would have a great integrity of putting it forward where people could understand the importance of art.
This award that is being started, I'm sure is going to be amazing.
Art for India and for Indians is an expression of our Atmanirbharta.
It's actually quite a formidable jury, so I think we'll reveal a lot more as we go along.
This is an amazing platform, I think, today what you're doing.
Honoring the masters who define our creative landscape. Coming soon on the NDTV network.
straight from the heart of the newsroom to the core of the stories shaping your world. Join me, Gargi Raut, as I track all the developments as they break. Live from the NDTV newsroom, weekdays at 4 p.m.
21 days in Kashmir. People have bombarded me, friends, with requests for an unfiltered list of things I saw and observed on the ground.
Very special ground report from the line of control. There were some children who've lost limbs in the shelling.
They are now India's smallest but possibly the most powerful crime family. Cough syrup has killed at least 25 children. Gaikwad sahab, aise mat kijiye. Suddenly people are wondering about the weaponization of India-Pakistan cricket. We live and breathe